1939, Passau. Nestled along the edges of the majestic Danube, Passau was an emblem of Germany's heritage, culture, and artistry. From the chiming bells of the Gothic cathedral to the cobblestone pathways trodden by generations, the town was a peaceful haven. But as the winds of change blew across Europe, even the tranquil corners of Passau felt the tempestuous undercurrents of the coming storm. In the heart of this picturesque town lived Konrad Bauer, a brilliant young man fresh out of the University of Munich. His academic triumphs had always been the focal point of his identity, but in the shadow of the impending war, he took a momentous decision that startled everyone: to enlist in the Kriegsmarine's Unterseeboot fleet. Elsa, Konrad's childhood love, tried in vain to dissuade him. Their evenings, which were once filled with dreams of a serene future together, now echoed with earnest pleas and debates. "Remember our dreams, our plans," Elsa would whisper, clutching the letters he had written her over the years. Konrad's parents, pillars of strength and understanding, struggled to reconcile with his choice. His mother, with her soft voice, would recall tales of the mighty Danube's perils, trying to mirror them with the vast unknown ocean's dangers. Determined, Konrad prepared for his departure. As he stood at Passau's railway station, the vast network of German railways unfurled before him. This intricate web was a testament to Germany's determination and engineering prowess. The transition from the quietude of Passau to the bustling energy of military bases was a journey he was poised to take. Aboard the train, the rhythmic chugging of wheels against steel became a constant companion. Konrad was not alone. Many young men, filled with a cocktail of excitement and trepidation, were bound for similar fates. Among them, he met Friedrich, a lively individual from Hamburg with a penchant for singing old sea shanties, and Emil, whose quiet demeanor hid a depth of poetic creativity. The Baltic coast was their initial rendezvous with destiny. Here, nature's frigid breath was a stark contrast to Passau's gentle climate. However, the sight of vast waters meeting the horizon and submarines, those metallic leviathans, affirmed Konrad's resolve. The intense training regime left little room for respite. Yet, in those scarce moments of relaxation, the relationships between the sailors flourished. Friedrich introduced Konrad to some delights of the northern seas, stories interspersed with songs that spoke of legendary sea creatures and brave mariners. Emil, in contrast, would share his poems, drawing parallels between the turbulence of war and the tumultuous sea. Konrad also befriended Lukas, a tactician with an analytical mind. Together, they'd strategize, plotting imaginary scenarios and escapes. This mental exercise became a pastime, giving them a semblance of control in unpredictable waters. It was also during these breaks that Konrad heard tales of rivalry between the Unterseeboot fleet and the colossal surface ships. Battles of wits, tactics, and strategy were common narratives, each group trying to outdo the other. Soon, the Baltic's icy embrace was left behind as the train headed towards Wilhelmshaven. Conversations now were not just nostalgic or hopeful, but also filled with purpose and responsibility. There was an understanding that the next chapter of their lives was about to begin. The U-162 awaited Konrad at Wilhelmshaven. To say he was awed by the vessel would be an understatement. It was here that the training and relationships forged would be tested. The crew, under the vessel's protective steel, became an intertwined family, their fates sealed together. Their inaugural mission took them to the heart of enemy territory. Amid the deep blue expanse, the U-162 identified a solitary English freighter. The entire submarine held its collective breath as they prepared for attack. When the freighter met its watery demise, the crew felt a complex web of emotions: pride at their tactical victory, sadness for the lives lost, and relief for their own safety. Life in a submarine was an unparalleled experience. The initial adrenaline of the mission slowly gave way to the monotony and claustrophobia of life underwater. Fresh food became a luxury, replaced by canned sustenance. Memories of sumptuous meals back home became common tales, each sailor reminiscing about their favorite dishes. Despite the hardships, camaraderie deepened. Friedrich's shanties became an evening ritual, with the crew joining in, their voices echoing in the submarine's confines. Emil would recite poems, creating verses that reflected their daily lives, capturing fears, hopes, and dreams. Luca's and Conrad's strategic sessions evolved, incorporating real experiences, lessons learned, and improvisations for future encounters. Conrad often found himself gravitating towards Dieter, a seasoned sailor with many tales from his previous deployments. Dieter became a mentor of sorts, guiding Conrad through the mental challenges of prolonged submarine deployments. From him, Conrad learned the importance of patience, restraint, and empathy in leadership. But war was relentless. Every mission brought its share of challenges, each more formidable than the last. Encounters with enemy vessels, evading depth charges, and navigating through mined waters became harrowing narratives. The submarine's return to Wilhelmshaven in 1941 was not just a physical journey, but also an emotional one. The sight of the familiar railway tracks, which had once symbolized the start of his journey, now represented a loop of memories, experiences, and relationships. As the cold winds of Wilhelmshaven played with his hair, Conrad knew one thing: the rails had set him on a path of discovery, and the vast ocean had shown him the depths of human spirit and resilience. As 1941 faded and the world entered a new year, Conrad found himself in a curious juxtaposition of emotions. The glistening waters of Wilhelmshaven, which had once represented freedom and adventure, were now symbols of poignant memories and harrowing experiences. The camaraderie aboard the U-162 was unwavering, but the weight of the war and the unyielding ocean had left its mark on every sailor. Returning to the base, the sitter greeted them with a mix of reverence and curiosity. The heroics of the U-162 were whispered in corners, their tales growing taller with every retelling. While the tales spoke of bravery and strategy, only the sailors knew of the personal costs and the memories they'd prefer to forget. One chilly evening, as the sailors congregated at a local tavern, the warm golden glow of the lanterns casting long shadows, Friedrich started one of his popular shanties. But this time, instead of a merry tune, it was a somber melody reflecting the burdens of their hearts. The once boisterous group now had a pensive aura, with even Emil struggling to put pen to paper, his poems taking on a melancholic tone. Lucas, with his strategic mind, had begun attending naval strategy sessions, bringing back to the group information, tactics, and sometimes disturbingly accurate forecasts of the war's trajectory. His updates, however insightful, also weighed heavily on them, for the forecasts painted a grim picture of protracted warfare. Conrad's relationship with Dieter evolved further. The seasoned sailor, sensing Conrad's deep-seated restlessness, took him under his wing. They'd often take long walks along Wilhelmshaven's docks, watching new recruits with bright eyes, reminiscent of their own not so long ago. Dieter spoke of his family, of a son he had lost in the earlier war, and of a world he hoped would find peace. His tales, filled with lessons of life and leadership, became Conrad's guiding light. One particular evening, as they stood watching the sun's golden hues fade into twilight, Dieter handed Conrad a letter. It was old and worn, edges frayed, but the words inside were as poignant as ever. It was from Dieter's son, speaking of dreams, love, and a longing for home. The gravity of the letter wasn't lost on Conrad. He realized that wars were not just battles in distant lands or waters, but also battles within, fought every day. Days melded into weeks, and Conrad was told to take leave. He decided to return to Passau. The train journey back was contemplative. The landscapes, though unchanged, seemed different. The rolling hills, dense forests, and quaint villages all seemed to ask him silent questions about his adventures and his state of mind. Passau was as he remembered, yet different. Elsa, now a young woman bearing the weight of waiting, rushed into his arms. Their reunion was a blend of joy, tears, and unspoken emotions. They spoke of dreams, of a future together, and of a world without wars. His parents, though aged by worry, beamed with pride and relief. But the tranquility of Passau was short-lived. Soon, Conrad was summoned back to Wilhelmshaven. The U-162 was being prepped for another mission. This time, the stakes were higher, the challenges more formidable. As he boarded the submarine, the weight of responsibility pressing on him, Conrad knew that the journey ahead would not just test his training and strategy, but also his very soul. Yet, amidst the looming dangers, there was hope. For in the hearts of every sailor aboard the U-162, there was a belief in camaraderie, in shared dreams, and in the possibility of a world at peace. The gentle hum of the U-162's machinery had become a familiar and comforting sound for Conrad. But the war, in its ever-unpredictable nature, had another twist in store for him. One cloudy morning, as the crew prepared for a tactical meeting, an official communication was handed over. Conrad was being transferred. Whispers spread among the crew. The U-195, operating out of Lorient, a coastal town in Brittany, France, was to be his new assignment. The strategic importance of the French ports was well known. They were key to the Battle of the Atlantic. The U-boats operating from there were renowned not just for their advanced technology, but also for their audacious operations deep into enemy territory. As he boarded the train that would take him through the heart of Germany and eventually to France, Conrad felt a sense of unease. The German railway system, once a symbol of hope and adventure, now seemed like an endless maze of changing assignments, each with its own set of challenges. His journey was interspersed with brief moments of respite, watching the scenic landscapes of both countries. The lush vineyards, picturesque villages, and old castles held stories of love, war, and legacy. The changing scenery outside his window served as a reflection of the changing scenarios of his own life. Lorient was unlike any other place Conrad had been to. The sprawling submarine pens, massive concrete structures designed to protect the U-boats from aerial bombings, dominated the landscape. The bustling port town, with its mix of German officers, French civilians, and a palpable tension in the air, was a constant reminder of the occupation. U-195 was a sight to behold. Slightly larger and brimming with new technological advances, it was touted as one of the Kriegsmarine's crowning jewels. As Conrad got acquainted with the vessel, he also began to familiarize himself with his new crew. Captain Heinz, a battle-hardened veteran with sharp features and piercing eyes, immediately recognized Conrad's potential. Then there was Max, a jovial engineer with an infectious enthusiasm for the U-boat's mechanics. The bond with Max was instantaneous, both sharing tales of their hometowns and families left behind. Among the crew was Pierre, a Frenchman. His inclusion was unusual, but his expertise in navigating the treacherous waters around the local waters was unparalleled. Pierre, with his deep-set eyes, held stories of a different France, a nation grappling with occupation, identity, and resistance. The tales he shared in hushed tones about the French resistance, their valiant efforts, and the delicate dance of collaboration and rebellion added a new dimension to Conrad's understanding of the war. Life aboard the U-195 was, in many ways, similar to his time on the U-162. The close quarters, the camaraderie, the highs of a successful mission, and the gut-wrenching lows of evading enemy destroyers remained. Yet, operating out of Lorient had its unique challenges. The U-195's missions took them closer to British waters, their operations more audacious, and their encounters with the enemy more frequent. The tense atmosphere was occasionally broken by letters from home. Elsa's words, filled with love, hope, and longing, became Conrad's anchor. Her tales of Passau, of their favorite spots, and the dream of a peaceful life post-war was a balm to his weary soul. One fateful mission saw the U-195 navigating the Bay of Biscay, a notorious hunting ground for Allied aircraft, as depth charges exploded around them, shaking the vessel and plunging it to dangerous depths. The crew held their collective breath. It was Pierre's expertise and Captain Heinz's leadership that saved them, evading the enemy and limping back to Lorient with minor damages. The incident, however, deepened the bond among the crew, the realization that their lives depended on trust, understanding, and collaboration was more evident than ever. Conrad, with his analytical mind and calm demeanor, became an invaluable asset, not just in tactics but also in boosting morale. Days turned into months, and the weight of the war, both on land and sea, began to press upon the hearts and minds of the U-195 crew. Yet, amidst the looming shadows of warfare, there were slivers of humanity, of shared stories, dreams, and the undying hope for a world at peace. Life in Lorient for Conrad was a study in contrasts. The town was a testament to the complexities of wartime. Lined with picturesque bistros and bakeries, the daily life of its inhabitants continued, albeit under the watchful eyes of the German occupation. However, the submarine pens, constructed of thick, reinforced concrete, stood as ominous reminders of the war that raged. Conrad had lodgings on the outskirts of Lorient. Its rustic charm, complete with wooden beams and a fireplace, was a far cry from the cold steel of the U-195. However, it gave him a semblance of normality in the war's chaotic maelstrom. From his window, he could see the hustle and bustle of French life, children playing, old men playing pétanque, and women chatting animatedly in the markets. Yet, underlying it all was the tension of an occupied nation. On weekends when he wasn't on duty, Conrad tried to immerse himself in French culture. He'd visit cafes, practicing his French with the locals, and often ending up in deep conversations about art, music, and sometimes the politics of war. These interactions opened his eyes to the nuances of occupation, the daily struggles of the French, and their yearning for freedom. Conrad's trips back to Passau were the highlights of his postings in France. The German railways, efficient and punctual, offered first-class carriages. The U-boat arm of the Kriegsmarine was distinct not just in its operations but also in the way it treated its sailors. While every sailor in the German Navy faced danger, those aboard the U-boats grappled with unique challenges: confined spaces, the omnipresent threat of depth charges, and the psychological toll of extended periods underwater. Recognizing these challenges, the Kriegsmarine granted U-boat sailors certain privileges. The first of these was travel. When on leave, U-boat sailors always traveled first class. The German railway carriages, a symbol of the nation's technological prowess, reserved their best for these submariners. Plush seats, elegant dining cars, and impeccable service, it was a world away from the confines of a submarine. For sailors like Conrad, these journeys were more than just travel. They were brief sojourns into a world of comfort and luxury, a stark contrast to the harsh realities of U-boat life. Then there was the pay. U-boat sailors drew higher salaries compared to their counterparts on surface ships. This wasn't merely a reflection of the dangers they faced, but also an acknowledgement of their elite status within the Navy. Their successes in the early parts of the war, sinking significant tonnage and disrupting Allied supply lines, had elevated their stature, making them both revered and envied within military circles. Conrad's prowess hadn't gone unnoticed. His analytical skills, coupled with his ability to maintain calm under pressure, had marked him for bigger responsibilities. One crisp morning, after a particularly grueling mission, Conrad was summoned to Captain Heinz's quarters. Expecting a debrief, Conrad was taken aback when handed a new set of insignias. "You've earned this," Captain Heinz said, his usually stern face breaking into a rare smile. Conrad was being promoted to executive officer. The weight of the new rank wasn't lost on him. As executive officer, or first watch officer as it was commonly known, Conrad would be the second in command, responsible for not only tactical decisions but also the well-being of the crew. But there was more news. Along with his promotion, Conrad was being transferred to a new submarine. The Type 7C U-boat, the workhorse of the German submarine fleet, was an advanced piece of engineering. Faster, with a longer range and more torpedoes, it was designed for extended operations. He was to join U-271, operating out of Saint-Nazaire, another key U-boat base in France. Conrad's feelings were mixed. The pride of promotion was tempered by the thought of leaving the U-195 and its crew, which had become like family. Yet, the excitement of taking on new challenges on a state-of-the-art submarine was undeniable. His last night aboard the U-195 was filled with emotions. The crew threw an impromptu celebration, with songs, laughter, and tales of missions past. As they sang, joked, and reminisced, Conrad realized that while submarines, bases, and missions might change, the bond between sailors, forged in the crucible of war, remained unbreakable. As dawn broke, Conrad, with his new insignias shining, boarded a train bound for Saint-Nazaire, ready for the next chapter in his naval journey. 1942 dawned with a shifting tide. The Allies, having suffered heavy losses at the hands of the U-boats, were now better coordinated and more strategic in their approach. The U-boat arm of the Kriegsmarine, though still a formidable force, faced increased challenges. In the heart of this maelstrom stood U-271, its sleek form cutting through the cold Atlantic waters. Conrad, now an executive officer, had quickly familiarized himself with the nuances of the Type 7C U-boat and its crew. The weight of his new rank and the greater responsibilities it entailed were ever present. But he was ready. The mission, as briefed by the Naval Command, was straightforward on paper but arduous in reality. U-271 was to patrol the mid-Atlantic region, targeting the vital Allied convoys. These supply ships, carrying everything from ammunition to food, were the lifelines for the war effort against the Axis powers. Disrupting them was paramount. Several days into their patrol, the lookout reported smoke. Bearing 215, a convoy was within striking distance. The order was given to dive U-271. Captain Boliban, a grizzled veteran, and Conrad quickly reviewed the tactical scenario. The decision was made. They would attack under the cover of night. Using the darkness as a cloak, U-271 moved closer, its crew in silent anticipation. As the torpedoes were launched, time seemed to stand still. The silence of the deep was soon shattered by distant explosions. 2 merchant vessels had been hit. However, the convoy wasn't unguarded. As the U-boat prepared to dive deeper and evade, the sonar picked up fast approaching enemy destroyers. The cat-and-mouse game began. The destroyers, equipped with advanced sonar, pursued U-271 relentlessly. Depth charges, Lethal anti-submarine weapons were dropped in patterns. Each explosion sent shockwaves through the submarine, rattling equipment and jolting the crew. Conrad, drawing on his experience and training, barked orders, adjusting the U-boat's depth and direction, trying to outmaneuver the destroyers. The control room lights were switched on, and the submarine went silent, a tactic to make detection harder. Inside U-271, the atmosphere was tense. The constant hum of the engines, the muffled sounds of the ocean, and the occasional creak of the hull were the only noises. Each sailor knew the stakes. Depth charges, if close enough, could rupture the hull, sending the U-boat and its crew to a watery grave. Hours felt like days, but Conrad's strategy, combined with a bit of luck, seemed to work. The explosions grew distant, yet the danger wasn't over. U-271 had sustained minor damages and was slowly taking on water. Repairs, while evading the enemy, were a challenge. Working tirelessly, the crew managed to patch up the leaks. Their oxygen levels were low, necessitating a risky ascent to periscope depth for fresh air. The sonar remained silent, the destroyers having lost their trail. When U-271 finally surfaced under the cover of darkness, the relief was palpable. The crew, exhausted yet alive, took a moment to breathe in the cold Atlantic air. The dangers they'd faced had forged an even stronger bond among them. The depth charge ordeal wasn't just a tale of survival, but a testament to their collective will and determination. Conrad, reflecting on the events, realized that each patrol was a roll of the dice. The war was evolving, and so were the challenges. But for now, U-271 and its crew had triumphed over the abyss, ready to fight another day. After the harrowing patrol in the Atlantic, U-271 limped its way back to the submarine pens at St. Nazaire. The damage from the depth charges was more than superficial. The hull bore the scars of the ordeal. Some sections of the pressure hull had micro-fractures, and the dive controls were glitchy. The once sleek U-boat now bore the battle-worn look of a veteran. The Kriegsmarine's engineers and mechanics descended upon U-271, evaluating the extent of the damage. The verdict was clear. U-271 would be dry-docked for a comprehensive overhaul. While this meant that the submarine would be out of action for a while, it also presented an unexpected respite for its crew. Extended leaves were granted, and sailors eagerly made plans to return to their homes and families. For Conrad, this was a golden opportunity. He boarded the next first-class train, bound for Passau. As the scenic vistas of France gave way to the dense forests and rolling meadows of Germany, his thoughts raced ahead to Elsa. They had corresponded regularly, their letters filled with longing and the shared weight of war. He remembered her last letter, where she'd hinted at building a life together, a life beyond the shadows of the conflict. Passau greeted Conrad with its familiar charm. The confluence of 3 rivers, the cobblestone streets, and the spires of the St. Stephen's Cathedral were a sight for sore eyes. But his heart raced for a different reunion. Elsa awaited him at their usual spot, the banks of the Danube. Their embrace was one of relief, passion, and a promise of better days. They spent hours talking, reminiscing about their younger days, sharing dreams, and contemplating their future. One evening, while walking along the riverbank, with the setting sun casting a golden hue, Conrad, with a hint of nervousness, went down on one knee. He presented Elsa with a delicate ring, its design reminiscent of the waves of the ocean. "Marry me," he whispered. Tears welled up in Elsa's eyes as she nodded, sealing their bond. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparations. Both families, realizing the uncertainties of war, decided on a quick wedding. The town came together, turning the gloomy war-torn atmosphere into one of celebration. Their wedding, held at the St. Stephen's Cathedral, was a testament to love triumphing in the darkest of times. The day of departure came very quickly. Standing at the Passau train station and waving goodbye to Elsa, Conrad could only wish the war would end so a normal life could resume. As the train pulled away, Conrad settled into his first-class seat, the events of the past days a distant memory. While the U-271 would soon be seaworthy, ready to plunge into the abyss, Conrad was looking forward to returning to his crew members, which were his second family. The train journey back to St. Nazaire was a contemplative one for Conrad. While the memories of Passau and the life he had started building with Elsa were still fresh, the looming shadow of his responsibilities began to creep in. The juxtaposition of war and love, duty and family weighed on him as the train chugged along. Upon reaching the U-boat base, Conrad was met with a scene of rejuvenation. U-271, now free from the shackles of the dry dock, gleamed under the sun. The battle scars were gone, replaced by a fresh coat of grey paint. The technical crew had been hard at work during Conrad's leave, not only repairing the damage but also incorporating certain upgrades based on feedback from the crew. The sonar system had been enhanced, and the torpedoes now boasted of improved propulsion and targeting mechanisms. The submarine seemed like a phoenix, reborn from its ashes. Captain Boliban met Conrad with a stern expression. "We sail in 2 days," he announced. The U-boat command, buoyed by the successes of the U-boat fleet and cognizant of the looming threats, had charted out another patrol into the Atlantic for U-271. The mission was once again to disrupt the vital Allied convoys, but with increased Allied protection for these convoys, it was clear that the patrols would be even more challenging. Inside the submarine, there was a palpable energy. While the crew was well rested after the extended maintenance period, the challenges they had faced during the last patrol were not forgotten. The close brushes with depth charges, the relentless pursuit by destroyers, and the constant tension of undersea warfare had left indelible marks on their psyche. However, camaraderie within U-271 had always been its strength. The sailors had developed a bond that was almost familial. Over shared meals, strategy games, and maintenance tasks, stories of home, hopes, and dreams were exchanged. This collective spirit had always been their shield against the harsh realities of submarine warfare. Conrad, now with the added responsibility of being the executive officer, took charge of pre-patrol drills. He made sure that each member was familiar with the upgrades, that evacuation drills were practiced to perfection, and that the crew was mentally prepared for the upcoming challenges. His leadership was a blend of empathy and assertiveness. The crew respected him, not just for his rank, but for his genuine concern for each one of them. As U-271 submerged and set course for the Atlantic, Conrad found himself in the control room, hands on the periscope, eyes scanning the horizon. The ocean, with its vastness and mysteries, beckoned. While the challenges would be many, Conrad and the crew of U-271 were ready, bound by duty, honor, and the indomitable spirit of the submariner. The vast expanse of the Atlantic is a paradox. It can be teeming with activity one moment and a silent void the next. For U-271, this patrol was characterized by the latter. The days turned into weeks as they prowled the vast waters. The sonar, usually abuzz with distant propeller sounds or the echoic signatures of marine life, was eerily quiet. The Allied convoys, it seemed, had changed their routes or timings. Captain Boliban and Conrad spent hours poring over charts and intercepts from the radio room, trying to predict the movement of potential targets. But the Atlantic remained a desolate hunting ground for U-271 on this patrol. There were no torpedoes launched, no evasive maneuvers executed, and no celebratory toasts for successful strikes. The quiet was both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, the absence of immediate danger. On the other, the gnawing uncertainty of an empty mission. However, the silence of the deep was soon to be replaced by the cacophony of aerial warfare. As U-271 neared the Bay of Biscay, a crucial entry and exit point for German U-boats operating from French bases, the threat from the skies became evident. The Allies had increased aerial patrols, using long-range aircraft equipped with radar and depth charges. These flying sentinels were on the lookout for the telltale signs of periscopes or the ghostly silhouettes of U-boats just beneath the surface. One early dawn, as the first rays of sunlight painted the ocean in a myriad of colors, the submarine's lookout reported the distant drone of an aircraft engine. The mood inside U-271 immediately tensed. A quick periscope sweep confirmed their worst fears. An Allied aircraft was heading directly towards them. The command was sharp and immediate. "Alarm!" Conrad shouted. Alarms blared as the U-boat initiated an emergency dive, angling itself steeply to disappear into the safer depths below. Within moments, the once silent world inside the U-boat was filled with the echoing pings of sonar and the distant, muffled roars of the aircraft engines. Suddenly, the water around them erupted as the aircraft dropped depth charges. Though designed for aerial combat, these depth charges were modified to explode at predetermined depths, wreaking havoc on any U-boat caught in their blast radius. The boat shook violently with each explosion. Lights flickered, and the pungent smell of burnt wiring filled the air. While U-271 was designed to withstand significant external pressure, the repeated shock waves tested the integrity of its hull. The crew, thrown off balance, clung to their stations, their faces pale but determined. Through his experience and keen understanding of underwater tactics, Conrad skillfully maneuvered the U-boat, making it a moving target, harder to pinpoint by the attacking aircraft. After what felt like an eternity, the explosions ceased, and a damage report was ordered by the captain. The U-boat had only just escaped the clutches of the enemy. However, this encounter was a stark reminder for Conrad and his crew. The balance of power was shifting. The seas and skies were no longer the sole dominion of the Kriegsmarine U-boats. The Allies were adapting, innovating, and the U-boat crews would have to do the same to survive. This ends Part 1.